Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais with another episode of the Yakking Show Business Channel. This is where we bring you experts to give you actionable tips and ideas to help you thrive and survive with your business in the interesting times we're heading into. Today's no exception. We have a really interesting guest, but first let's introduce co-host Kathleen Beauvais. Hi, Kathleen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you so much. And thank you also very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate having you. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today. We have the great privilege of welcoming Vicky Winkler to the show. Vicky is the owner of The Marketing Shop, and she specializes in print, graphic design, and brand building. So let's jump right in. Well, first of all, welcome, Vicky. How are you today?
Thank you. I am thrilled to be on the show.
So,
Good.
Vicky, what are the first things an entrepreneur should consider in terms of branding when starting a new business, or even, or for that matter, rebranding one?
Right. Well, we're in the business of branding, and so we of course think it's very important to get started with a good logo and a good brand. And so it's the foundation for everything that you're going to do in your communication. And so when you think about the longevity of building a brand and all of the things that go into it, to take that time to step back and really invest in having your brand done right. I don't think that entrepreneurs always realize. They think, well, I need a website, and so I need a little logo that goes on my website. But it's so much more than that, because there's when you think about apparel and website and social media and print materials and a business card, there's so many things that brand is going to be shown, so that it's really important to invest up front for something that's going to bring you years and years of value to come.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, brands evolve over time, and but in your experience, Vicky, how have customs and conventions in brand design changed over the last few years? Because I've seen changes in the websites we look at. What are the big changes?
Right. So, well, I think that obviously in the kind of the whole marketing material world is the whole onset of electronic media has really changed things. And people often say to me, my gosh, you're kind of in the print industry, are you afraid you're going to be out of business in a few years? But what we find is that our clients are just taking ways that they've traditionally used print and using them in different ways. We have a good example. We just had a client recently where they're a nonprofit, and they had toolkits that we would print these toolkits, and they were informational materials for their constituents. And they were several pages, they were booklets, and they had a number of them, and they were changing all the time. The information was always changing, so we were reprinting them on a regular basis. And so what they said, well, instead, what we'll do is we'll have teaser cards, that these were 4x9 rack cards, that they would then pass those out. And then on that was a clear call to action to send them to the website, where they had a special section for all the toolkits. And so we're in the process now of revamping all of those toolkits so that they're on electronically on their website as a flip book. And so very easy to read, and they can spend a lot less money printing these small teaser cards, but get the same result, and actually a lot more effective for them, because their toolkits are now very up to date. We can change them easily on a regular basis. And so again, it was just kind of a creative way to look at, okay, hey, these toolkits are super useful information, but they're changing all the time. So how do we do this? So just using print in different ways. I think the other thing too is that with the whole electronic communication and email marketing, if you think about going to your mailbox, how many direct mail postcards do you get versus what you got maybe 15 years ago? It's very little. And so if you really want to make an impact, send a direct mail postcard. We have a client that has a cleaning business, so they're fairly local. And they are amazed at how, so they, again, were trying to do all this electronic. They were sending email marketing, and they said, it's just not working that well. Well, because there's lots of other cleaning companies that are sending these things out too. They started to do direct mail again, which they had done years ago, and they're getting this huge response. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is the thing to do. The postcards are short, they're pithy, they're right to the point, and they're getting a great response out of it. So it's really just being creative in how you use print.
Sure. Very interesting. Yeah.
So, Vicky, what sets you apart from other graphic designers? Do you have a specialty?
Yeah, I would say it's our approach to branding. And so, when we have a client that comes in and maybe they'll say to us, oh, I just need a postcard. We say, well, let's see what everything else that you're doing. We want to take a look at your logo and take a look at your brand, your social media, your other print materials, because we feel so strongly about putting things together that are going to be consistent and build on a brand versus anything that's going to be you're going off in a different direction, because we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that all the communication that comes from an organization or a company, that it's consistent in its branding. So we're really we're very focused on that. And sometimes we'll have clients be like, oh, I just really want you to design a flyer for me. And we're saying, well, we don't want to do something that could possibly go against your brand
Mhm.
or be detrimental or not effective, because somebody might get it and be like, is this the same company? Because it doesn't look like the other stuff that I've gotten from them in the past. So we're real sticklers when it comes to branding, which is why we actually created a separate division of the company a couple of years ago, Stillwater Branding and Design, that focuses specifically on branding, because it was something we were good at and we just really felt strongly about as well.
Very good. Okay. So that sort of leads into what I was going to ask you, and that is, what's the biggest mistake most small businesses and entrepreneurs make when they're setting out to develop a brand and a strategy? And I think you've already started on that by people concentrating on the wrong things. But would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, to invest a little bit in it, as opposed to just going online, going to, one of the very inexpensive logo design software websites that you can go to, go to somebody who's going to really customize it, who's going to do some research for you, that's going to conduct maybe a focus group, and really make sure that the brand that you come up with, that you start with, is unique to you. And that it really fits your brand personality. So again, just kind of invest a little bit of time up front to make sure that it's really going to be effective, and be brutally honest about, if you're rebranding, for example, maybe you've been in business for 10 to 15 years, to really look at what's the competition doing, what are your close competitors to you, as well as national competitors in the same industry. Maybe it's even your brand name. And it can be a little daunting when people are thinking about changing their brand or changing their name or rebranding. But sometimes it can be the absolute thing that they need to do to take their business to a new level. They may not even realize sort of the damage that's being done or the lost opportunities, because their brand is just not on mark anymore. Maybe it was 15 years ago, but it's not anymore. So again, just really being brutally honest, and taking a look, doing a survey, whatever it takes to kind of say, hey, is my brand on track to where I want it to go?
And I think you bring up a good point, because it's been my experience, because we've had connections with a lot of small business owners, solopreneurs who do everything themselves. And it becomes a mishmash of, when it comes to the marketing of different things. Oh, I'm going to send out a flyer and I'm just going to use a template off of Google to create it. Or I'll just go to, a templated whatever to create a business card, and there's no cohesiveness there. It's all just, like I said, a mishmash of stuff. And I think this is where you would come in to kind of take a look at the whole picture and then create structure around that, correct?
Right. And one of the things is, studies have been done with people who are, for example, will open up a presentation folder, and in there is a brochure, is a flyer, is all these different types of materials. And when they're full of different fonts and colors, and they're very inconsistent, and things are hard to read, and they're not organized well, that it's very overwhelming. And two is, people will kind of look and they can't focus on the content because they're so distracted by everything else that's going on, versus that presentation folder that you open up and everything is the same fonts, the same colors, the same graphical look, is that people can focus on the content versus being so distracted by all the other stuff that's going on. So this is where people who don't have consistent marketing materials can actually be doing themselves a disservice, and their materials are so much more ineffective, when all they simply need to do is kind of rebrand that stuff, bring it together, bring it to in more consistency, so that people can more easily get to the information. And this can help across not only for-profits, but not for-profit companies, when you're looking for, if you're a not-for-profit, and a lot of people, depending on if you're sending materials out to the community and people are in a distress situation, they need things to be simple and easy and straightforward. And people don't read. It's one of the things I probably say it 10 times a day. Remember, people don't read. So we need to be short and pithy in all the communications that we have with individuals.
We've just seen a really good example of that consistency, Kathleen, with guest we had on the show a few weeks ago, and both Kathleen and I get her emails, and everything is in the same color, the same font, and it doesn't matter if it's her weekly newsletter, another email, her website, her podcast site, the episodes of the podcast, the whole deal. It's same colors, same font, same logos, and it just feels so much part of a whole that we were talking about it yesterday, how good a job she does.
Absolutely.
She probably got someone like you helping her, but that's we see the opposite too. As you were saying, we see things that are all over the place, and it puts you off. Good, yeah. Kathleen, sorry, back to you.
So Vicky, you've already touched on this earlier by saying that there's, that the cleaning company, for instance, that's now putting out little postcards to their clients in printed form. But having said that, are businesses on a whole investing as much into printed marketing material, such as the brochures and the flyers and the postcards and such, as they did about 10 years ago?
I would say you're probably right in that the actual amount of print is been reduced and people aren't printing as many materials. But I find that our clients they're being more strategic about what they do and also doing things to stand apart. So what we're finding is we're getting a lot more clients who want a business card that has rounded corners and foil impact and spot UV and special shapes and extra thick cards, because people are still going out and networking. They're still sending letters with business cards in it. And so there's and we encourage our clients that are trying to maybe grow a client base is that when you email, it's okay, email somebody as a prospect, but then send them a letter with a business card, because how many times do you get that in the mail? Almost never. You get how many emails a day do you get that are like, I found your website on the internet and I just was thinking that whatever. But how often do you get a letter in the mail with a really cool business card? So I know our business card for our company, the Marketing Shop, is it has a foil imprint on both sides, and it's a die cut of a puzzle piece, because our logo is a puzzle piece. And I've had it for years, and people will say, "Oh, you're the puzzle piece lady."
You go.
So people know, and a stack of business cards always stands out. And I always joke that when there's door prizes and we put our business card in the jar, that we get chosen more than anyone else, because they're feeling around in that jar and they're like, "Oh, this one." So.
Yeah, very good, very good. There's another aspect to using printed stuff. We were interviewing someone whose whole business is direct mail the other day, and he said you don't need permission to put something in somebody's mailbox, but you do to put it in their email inbox, right? And as he said, nowadays, as you've just said, there's so little direct mail. Many of us open it with interest because it's a rarity, whereas 10 years ago it was different, and we tend to delete emails if the subject line is not immediately compelling. And you can't get in trouble as long as you stick within common decency. You can't get into trouble for sending direct mail, which you can with email, right? For unsolicited emails. So there's another very good point. And I know I was reading a case the other day of a jeweler somewhere in the States, can't remember which city. He's using exclusively radio ads and direct mail, nothing else, and doing really, really well with those two. So there you go. So what's happening I know that fonts come and go in popularity and colors. I remember back going 30, 40 years ago in the corporate world, we wanted to put blue on a product label, and we did focus group, and people associated blue with medicine and not with food. So that was something we nearly fell into that trap. What's trending now in the form of fonts and colors and typefaces, website design? Anything interesting there?
Yeah. So I would think I'd say that the biggest trend is flat design, and also isometric design. So, it used to be, there was this time when full color and everybody was getting Photoshop. And so everybody started to add gradients and bevels. and metallic shine and little glows and all these other types of things to their logos because they could. Because people were, for example, they just needed a website. And so they would just put a kind of cool logo and they have all these special effects. Well, the pendulum has really swung. And so now the trend is more towards flat and solid designs, solid colors, not gradients, not bevels, not drop shadows. And we'll see it a lot in fact, the toolkits that we just put together recently. How do I describe the isometric design is sort of those, they're taken at an angle and they're vector graphics of people and objects and things like that. But again, it's still a very minimalist and vector design, vector based, very flat based. So that's the trend. The other trend is towards non-traditional color schemes. And so, I was trying to think, I was talking to my husband last night and I was trying to think if there was a financial trading company that had come out with a logo a number of years ago, and it was purple and lime green. And it was unlike the financial industry, because if you think of the financial industry, you think of blues and slate blue and gray
and yellow.
Yeah. And so they came up with this non-traditional color scheme, and people were a little bit like, whoa, but it drew so much attention. And so there has been a real trend towards that. In fact, we did some research for a medical client recently, and we did we did an analysis of logos in their state. And then we did analysis of logos in the United States. And what we found that in the United States, the more popular ones, there was all of these non-traditional color combinations. And so that's a real trend, because industries are getting so saturated, is that everything is out there in electronic media. So you can go to Google Images and you can type things in. And so within the industry, this is what I always say is you want to play in the same sandbox, but you still want to stand apart. And so non-traditional color combinations can be a really good way to do that. In some industries, it's really hard to come up with an icon that might be different than what someone else is doing, again, and to try to use it in a different way. And so a differing color combination can be the way to achieve that a distinctiveness in an industry that you're in.
Sure. And I think was an insurance company, wasn't it Gecko, that came up with a gecko and also a distinctive color at the same time, which I stuck in my mind. It's probably the only major insurance company brand I can remember. But that was noticeable for sure. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So, but minimalist on website design, lots of white space or lots of empty space. Yeah.
Very clean, minimalist looks.
Yes.
Very clean looks. Okay. Yeah, well, that's really good information to know. So, Vicky, on your website, you have a 4-step branding process. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. And that'll kind of go over even some of the things, kind of a nice summary of the things you talked about, is so when we start working with a branding client, the first thing we do is discovery and that's the first step, is we really get to know them. We'll ask them to gather up any marketing materials, print marketing materials that they've done. We'll want to look at their website, look at their social media, and really get to know them from an aspect of their marketing. But then also we have some logo guiding questions that we'll ask them for their branding, and then really get to know their personalities. We're working with a client right now, and it's kind of a doctor team, and kind of in a private session with the gal who's heading up the project, she said, yeah, I want to tell you a little bit about the different personalities of the different doctors that are going to be involved in this process. I mean, and that was so important for us to know as we were going forth in branding, because we knew some of the things that we need to address up front, that we needed to have some strong evidence for why we were going to be changing the brand, and delicately to try to address the reasons why the existing brand was not working, why it was dated, why it needed to be refreshed. And so it was really important during that discovery process, some of the things that you find out just in having conversations with people. And we always try to stress, hey, listen, let's really be honest here. You're hiring us, you're spending the money to have us do this. Let's do it right. So tell me all the nitty gritty. And some of those intangible things are really an important part of the process as well. So the discovery is the first stage. And then the second is research. And this is where we start to look at the competition. We look at the local competition. We look at national competition. And we also sometimes let's say a doctor's office, obviously their target market is going to be very locally based. But if they really want to stand apart, even in their local market, it's not only important to look at their local competitors, but it's important to look at the national industry and to see what trends, because you want to be ahead of where the local market is going.
Yep.
And so let's look at all of the national. Usually, like a doctor's office, we need to look internationally, but looking at nationally can really give us some ideas of where we may want to go and what direction. And so then the next stage is development. And this is where we really kind of get into the design work, where we start to develop concepts for the logo, different fonts, different colors. We experiment with, different treatments. And that's just an iterative process. We go back and forth with the client, improves until we get to a design that really works well. And then the last stage is implementation, which is where we start to put together all those marketing materials, making them cohesive, consistent with the brand, keeping all the fonts and the colors, and just really developing all of those marketing materials.
Do you, when you're dealing with some of your smaller clients who might not have a marketing department or any marketing people themselves, do you advise them on where to place adverts, where to put media, how to do their social media? Do you go as far as that as well, or is that not part of your service?
We don't do a lot of the electronic. We will do some actually designing of the social media posts, but we don't do a lot of work with Google, with ads, but we do have a lot of good resources that we will refer people to.
Okay, good. That's very, very interesting. And then, so you were talking about your other company as well. That is more specifically branding.
Yeah. So Stillwater Branding and Design is a division of the marketing shop.
Okay.
And then we're focused very heavily just on branding and rebranding of businesses, and also nonprofits that have an event, a charity event, and developing branding for that as well.
Okay, so that could be an event, could be a one-off. You could just do a campaign for that particular event and not an ongoing campaign. That's interesting. So I got one for you, Vicky, and you've obviously come across a lot of interesting people in business and in what you've been doing. So is there, in your experience, is there one mindset, characteristic, or habit that sets those who become successful in business apart from those that remain average? So one thing, or is it more complicated?
Yeah, I would say that, my whole philosophy always has been, since early in my career, is to, when you're faced with making a large decision, is to look at it and evaluate and say, well, I regret that I did this or that I didn't do this. And so I know in my business that I have done that. And I just kind of take a hard look, kind of take a good night's sleep and say, if I didn't do this, I think that I would regret it in 2 to 3 years from now? And if you say, yeah, I might regret that I didn't do that, then I would say, go for it.
That's good.
Absolutely.
That's a good one.
So Vicky, how do people contact you?
You can go to our website, which is www.tms.marketing, or Stillwater Branding, which is www.stillwaterbranding.com.
Wonderful.
Got it. Sorry, Stillwaterbranding is .com.
Yes. And
okay, got it.
And TMS is no .com in the end, just tms.marketing.
I got it. Yeah. And for people who are only listening to the audio, both of those website yours will be in the description on whatever channel you happen, or whatever platform you happen to be listening to this on. So thank you for that, Vicky. Back to you, Kathleen.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Vicky. We so appreciated having you. And thank you also very much for tuning in. And if anyone is interested in being a guest on our show, please go to theyakkingshow.com. All you need to do is click on the contacts tab, where you will find a short application form, and we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.